Here we go.
Hey, welcome back. I am your host, Pam Rogers.
And I am your co-host, Mara Dolan, and this is Going Disparate, Politics and Crime with Pam and Mara.
Hey, Mara, how are you?
I'm actually quite good today. I got a really good night's sleep. I'm feeling very summery. It's why I'm wearing white. I'm really looking forward to today's show.
Yes, we are having on a really, really good friend of mine, Maureen Mooney, who's a state rep out of New Hampshire. And we went to law school together. And she's a really, really good friend of mine. She's actually one of my favorite people in the world to talk to because whenever we get together, I'm always like, hey, I've got a half hour to talk. And then like 2 hours later, we're talking, but she makes me laugh. She's really, really funny.
That is huge. And I'll tell you, the New Hampshire legislature is pretty high profile right now because they are, well, some of them are trying to legalize cannabis in New Hampshire, which right now is the only New England state that does not have legalized cannabis. So we'd love to hear what Maureen Mooney has to say about that.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to get into that because she knows exactly what's going on. And I know you and I have different opinions about it. So we'll definitely get into it when we chat with Maureen.
Oh yeah, and then we'll go disparate for sure.
We'll go disparate. Absolutely.
And I just want listeners to know you can find us on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeart Podcasts. You can find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Insta @Going Disparate. And you can email us at pamandmara@gmail.com. We really want to hear from you.
Yeah. Our website is goingdisparate.com, and you can go to that website and sign up for our newsletter if you would like to.
Awesome. You ready to talk crime, hot topics in crime?
Yes. Let's chat about some crime. What do you want to talk about?
Well, a couple of things actually that we heard from listeners. One listener heard when you asked me about historic crimes that fascinated me, one of the first I thought of was Lizzie Borden. Well, we heard from a listener who had a friend who wrote a book about Lizzie Borden called The Trial of Lizzie Borden by Kara Robertson. And it looks so good that I ordered it. Pam, I can't put it down. It's phenomenally well researched and written. I've already learned a lot of things. Boy, I mean, really, really, really looks like Lizzie absolutely did it. But I learned some things I'd never known. For example, her defense attorney was a former governor and congressman from Massachusetts. Right.
No way. I didn't know that.
Isn't that incredible? He was apparently very well liked, very popular. So you can certainly imagine the impact of having that person as your defense attorney.
Oh my gosh, seriously. Now, remind me, was that in New Bedford or Fall River?
It was in Fall River. It was in Fall River. And the Bordens were a prominent family, but they had a branch of the family that was actually much more prominent. So the Bordens were pretty well to do, but the father did not use his money to make it possible for the family to enjoy the standard of living that apparently Lizzie wanted to enjoy. But there was another branch of the family that was phenomenally wealthy. And you just have to wonder, did they want a member of their family convicted of a double homicide?
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably not. And
Right.
Lizzie then got to enjoy all the family money, I would assume. And she probably spent a good deal of that on her criminal defense attorney / governor of Massachusetts.
Right, former governor, former congressman from Massachusetts. And another thing I wanted to bring up was a comment from another listener who contacted us about the David Penny case. This was the Jordan Neely case. It was the victim of what appears to be a homicide. He was a New York City street performer. He was homeless, and he was put in a chokehold on a New York City subway and died. Now, the alleged assailant, David Penny, was a former U.S. Marine. He's being charged with one count of second-degree manslaughter, which under New York law means that he recklessly caused the death of another person. But the state of New York is going to have to prove that he was aware that his actions posed a substantial risk that someone would be killed and disregarded that risk. But the point that our listener made is that there has been, I guess, a fair amount of press about the fact that Jordan Neely had a lengthy criminal record, but she said, wait a minute, without looking at the record, we don't know if he was ever even convicted of anything, right, Pam?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot more factual basis that you didn't throw in there, in regard to the fact that Jordan Neely was on the subway screaming, ranting and raving, saying he was ready to die, that he was ready to kill people. So it wasn't just like this gentleman who's sitting there by himself, minding his own business in this, right? So it's completely not that. The Marine actually waited a long time while this was going on. And then eventually when he realized people could really be in jeopardy is when he kind of jumped in. And again, that's going to be up to a jury. But I think there's a lot of video. I think there's a lot of witnesses. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I don't honestly think that the state will be able to prove their case against him. But as far as records go, yes, we hear this all the time. So anytime you're listening to the news, you'll hear someone say, oh, he's got a 15-page record, right? Or he's got arrested 40 times. What I can say to that is that's true. Until you and I look at records, and we look at records every single day. When we review a record, like one of the first things I always do is I go through that entire record and I'm like, what have they been charged with? When I cluster their arrests. And I look at, has there been a conviction? Has there been some type of continuance without a finding? Has it been dismissed? Has it been indicted, right? You look for all these different things. And then at the end of the day, you can say, well, over, an 8-year time period, this particular person has been arrested 12 times. And of those 12 times, it's resulted in 3 felony convictions and 4 misdemeanor convictions, right? So that's what you do. That's what a practitioner does. I know the press loves to look at something and just say, oh my gosh, there's been 40 arrests. I do want to say one thing though. And I'm a very zealous criminal defense attorney, as you know.
You are. I'm listening.
But a normal person or an average person or a good citizen does not get arrested 40 times, period. Whether all of those cases were dismissed, I don't really care. You don't get arrested 40 times.
So I do think this raises the issue of the presumption of innocence and how important it is to hold on to the presumption of innocence and how sometimes that's hard to do. If someone has a 30-page record, you are inclined to say, wait a minute, they really get, they got 15 dismissals for an assault and battery, it does raise a question. And certainly one would expect a judge to take that into account.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is in this particular case with Jordan Neely is that it's sort of the flip side. The defendant, the person who's being arrested, doesn't have 40 prior arrests. It's the alleged victim who's got the 40 prior arrests, right? So it's kind of a flip side. You don't see that very often.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. That's true. But we, of course, believe in upholding the presumption of innocence, especially as defense attorneys. And we know people do make false charges. I think it happens a lot more than people realize it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for 22 years, Mara. I know you're probably at like 20. I mean, I've handled literally thousands and thousands.
Right.
You've seen every single animal you could possibly see, like whether it's like some massive case or like a really small case. You just see everything. And over a long period of time with experience like you and I have, it's like we can pretty much cut through the wheat and just go like, okay, this is what a case is. This is what we're
essence. Right.
Pretty easy. But I understand how the press likes to report things, and that's not necessarily maybe the best lens for people to look at a case through.
Well, the way I look at it is this. We as attorneys say that, we would rather see, the criminal justice system would rather see 1,000 guilty people freed than 1 innocent person wrongfully convicted. Press looks at it the opposite way. They would rather convict 1,000 innocent people than see 1 guilty person go free.
Yeah. And that, what you just quoted is like a really old quote you hear people around the courthouse saying all the time. And I always like to say that, hang on, I haven't said this in a while. In the halls of justice, the only justice is in the halls.
Oh, that's great. I've actually never heard that.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that's great. That's great. So I am so excited about our guest. Can you introduce her, Pam?
I can. Is she with us? She's joining
here. I'm going to bring her in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I will. Maureen.
All right.
Hey.
Maureen.
I see you both. Congratulations.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, this is fantastic. This show covers so many great topics, and the energy of the two of you just makes you want to listen all day long.
Aw.
So much, Maureen. That is super nice. And I want to introduce you to our listeners. So today we are being joined by, as I said before, when you weren't listening, one of my favorite people in the world, but Representative Maureen Mooney, who is in her 5th term representing Merrimack in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. Currently, Maureen serves on the House Finance Committee as a vice chair. Additionally, she is on the Speaker's Advisory Group and an alternate on the Fiscal Committee. Maureen has been a member of and held various positions in all forms of government, including being a state party committee member and a delegate to the Republican National Convention in 2008. And Maureen went to law school with me and earned her JD from the Massachusetts School of Law in Andover, Massachusetts.
This is all
Absolutely.
MSL, all MSL today. We're all MSL grads, proud and grateful MSL grads, right?
Very true. Aren't we so fortunate to have
Yes.
gone to a great law school where the skills we picked up are just so useful and used all the time in public life?
Ain't it the truth? Yep.
Absolutely, Maureen. I've always said that I am eternally grateful to Dean Bellbell, Louise Rose, and Maureen Coyne, because their starting of the school has given me a whole new life, has given me 22 years of a very professional career, and I am eternally grateful to them for that.
Oh, it's amazing what they've done. And I run into MSL graduates all the time. And they are all so grateful and they're doing so well. So congratulations to MSL. They've really done fantastic work in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and beyond.
Yep, absolutely. I totally agree. So Maureen, first things first, I want you to explain to Mara and I, as well as our listeners, about the unusual makeup of the New Hampshire House this season. What's going on?
Very unusual. It's amazing how this term has turned out. Last November, the New Hampshire House came out at the election at a virtual tie. And since that time, there have been resignations. Naturally, life goes on. It's a 400-member body and things happen. So right now, the count is, if you can believe it, 200 Republicans and 196 Democrats. Now, there'll be a special election soon in Nashua that will likely go Democrat. So soon it will likely be 197 to 200. But New Hampshire hasn't seen anything nearly this close since the year 1871.
Wow.
So we are really facing some very unique times. And it's been fascinating this past term working like this.
Well, I would assume, Maureen, that you have to really work hand in hand with a lot of Democrats to get any type of legislation passed.
There is no doubt. A lot of compromise here. In fact, our committees, most of our committees are pretty much 10 to 10, an even split, Democrats and Republicans. And occasionally, yes, there's a 10 to 10 standoff, but for the most part, I'm seeing tremendous compromise. I also feel that the voters have given us a real mandate, and the mandate is get along and get things done.
That with a body of 400 people, I can only see how that is incredibly important with this type of a split. And Maureen, just refresh my memory, but is the New Hampshire House the 3rd largest or the 4th largest body of representatives in the world?
It's the 3rd largest representative body in the English-speaking world. So in first place is British Parliament. Second place is US Congress. And then 3rd place, of all things, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire,
So,
wow.
Now, interestingly enough, we have the largest House in the country with 400 members. And at the same time, the smallest Senate, 24 members. And their
Wow.
breakdown right now is 14 Republicans to 10 Democrats. So the Senate has maintained a Republican majority, as the House has, but they have a little more of a cushion than we do right now.
Good,
So-
and I want to get to that as we go forward and talk about a pretty hot issue in New Hampshire right now. It's cannabis legalization. New Hampshire is the only state in New England that has not legalized cannabis. I'm in Massachusetts. We legalized it not through the legislature, but at the ballot in 2016. It was controversial at the time. And I know that New Hampshire decriminalized cannabis in 2017. But tell us what happened this week, Maureen.
Yeah, real big update on that. Just yesterday, actually, one of the bills, probably the one that was most likely to pass, that the House passed, went to the Senate and was killed in the Senate. So I would say this term, the only viable bill that would have made marijuana legal in New Hampshire died yesterday. That was House Bill 639. You know, interestingly enough about this issue, and in the House, it has passed now 2 bills this term on marijuana, 2 by a pretty comfortable margin, but they tend to get caught up in the Senate. Now, this issue is very fascinating because it's completely blurred. And what I mean by that is there are Democrats and Republicans both in favor of legalizing marijuana and both in the camp to not legalize it. Very few issues tend to be so blurred, really. Most are partisan, or, you know, at least you know what the party platform or position is, but not with marijuana. In fact, last term, I sat next to the dean of the New Hampshire House. And at the time, it was a longtime Democrat rep from Portsmouth. Now, rarely did our buttons match when it came time to vote. Rarely were our voting stations the same color. However, when it came to the legalization of marijuana, we were both against it, and our buttons were the same color. Now, yesterday in the Senate on this House Bill 639, which, by the way, would have legalized marijuana in New Hampshire for anyone 21 and older. And it also had attached to it a 12.5% sales tax. So a little bit of a turn to all of this, because as you know, New Hampshire has been free of a sales and an income tax for so long. So different details in this bill. But yesterday, the debate was very fascinating. Massachusetts came up a lot. Colorado came up a lot.
Right.
The vote came out 14-10, as you would have expected. However, there was one Democrat that voted to not legalize marijuana, and there was one Republican that voted to legalize. So again, it sort of demonstrated that this was certainly blurred in the sense that it was not down party lines.
Maureen, I was reading about this bill this morning in the news, and I just want to read you a quote from Senator Becky Whitley, who is a Democrat. And she said, quote, "Youth already use marijuana right now in our state. It's undeniable. What I want to see is a decrease in that use. And if we legalize, that's what I'm hearing will happen." So when I read that, I was like, that doesn't really seem to me to be the case. I don't think you legalize marijuana and people are like, oh, I've decided not to use it. I only want to use it when I can break the law. I don't really understand like where that came from. And obviously there's probably some study somewhere that Senator Whitley saw or someone presented to her. But in my opinion, from someone who's been working in a criminal justice system for 22 years, I don't think I've seen a decrease even remotely in Massachusetts. I actually am really against the use of marijuana. I feel like it is the dumbing down of America, it's the dumbing down of our youth. And I see so many people that come through the court system that are very avid marijuana users. And I feel bad for them. It's not going to make you smarter. Not going to make you smarter. Did you hear that Senator Whitley said that? And what do you think about it?
Yes. In fact, I listened to the debate yesterday. It went well over an hour. And I thought the points were so good, and the debate was really exceptional. Oftentimes you don't get such a great debate on various issues, but this one was very pointed. Somebody would bring up something, somebody would counteract it. I did hear that comment. It was a bit surprising, and there were several senators that challenged her on that. Youth was a huge theme of yesterday, and several senators referred to the fact that if New Hampshire were to put a state of approval, essentially, by legalizing marijuana, that would send a message to the youth that it is not a health risk, that it is okay. And that would be detrimental to our youth. I also want to point out a couple of interesting things about the debate yesterday. One of the senators, who I would say led the debate against legalizing marijuana in New Hampshire, was none other than MSL graduate Senator Gannon.
Really?
From Sandown and Epping
Oh,
and Brentwood, that area. And he brought up some very good points. Senator Lou D'Alessandro, the Dean of the Senate, he's a Democrat, longtime Democrat, senator from Manchester. He spoke very eloquently against legalizing marijuana. In fact, he called it, this is probably, he said, the most important issue he has spoken on. And he mentioned too, real concerns with the youth and the effect that it would have on our youth. Getting back to Senator Gannon, he said during the debate, of all things, that he has spoken several times to Massachusetts policemen, and he has heard from them, quote unquote, it's the biggest mistake Massachusetts ever made. Woo.
I just want to say, I do support legalization. However, I really share these concerns about the public health risk of using cannabis, especially with youth. There's a researcher at McLean who specializes in cannabis addiction, and found that teenagers, the younger you are when you're using cannabis, the more at risk it puts you of actually becoming psychotic. I mean, I think it's like alcohol. There are people who can have a drink or two and they're fine, and other people who can't have any. And I think that cannabis is the same thing, and we are kidding ourselves. And I do think it is very dangerous to send the message that it's benign. It's not benign. You got to be very careful if you're going to use it.
yeah. Maureen, can I get back to one thing that you just said about Senator Gannon? He said in speaking with the police that they've said that legalizing marijuana is the biggest mistake that Massachusetts has ever made. And I thought for sure that electing Elizabeth Warren was the biggest mistake.
Love Elizabeth Warren.
I could go through a long list of mistakes that Massachusetts has made.
I think that could be a topic of its own show, or the list of mistakes that Massachusetts has made.
Hey, Massachusetts resident here. Proud Elizabeth Warren voter. It's okay. We'll go disparate later.
Oh my God.
But yes, it also came up a few more points to your point there about the effects of it. It was mentioned that there's an opioid crisis. There's also a mental health crisis in our state, and marijuana has a negative effect on both. So why would we go that route in order to legalize it and aggravate both of those?
Maureen, can I ask you, in the discussions about possibly legalizing, which seems to me it's inevitable. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it seems to me like it's inevitable. This is the direction all states are moving in. Is there discussion about a public health education campaign so that at least if folks are using it, they know what reasonable use is, they know what the risks are, they can identify those and get help if they need it?
There was mention of that yesterday, yes, in that there needs to be more of that. And there were some that questioned how sufficient that was related to this bill. But yes, public health is certainly something. One senator yesterday, in speaking in favor of legalizing it, called New Hampshire, quote, the island of prohibition.
Yeah.
To your point, meaning that some feel like it is closing in. I mean, we are the last New England state holdout, We will be for this term, but who knows what the next election will bring, what the next governor will bring. If ever we have someone other than Governor Sununu, and you just don't know in elected politics. You know, at the very end of the debate, it came up, and this is something, you know, I'd be interested to hear what Massachusetts thought of this, but the argument was, folks, let's not forget marijuana is illegal on the federal level. And so there's that conflict that we have not gotten over that hurdle in order to manage marijuana sales. Some senators also questioned revenue. You know, revenue was brought up certainly in favor, but then other senators brought up that revenue promises in states that have legalized marijuana have not been as high as were projected.
That's
So
interesting. You know what? We were just talking about, you know, educating people, as you said, Mara, maybe through some type of campaign. It does make me wonder, because I don't think that kids that are, say, you know, 12, 14, 16, maybe even 18, 20, I don't think they watch the news. I don't think they even watch regular TV like ABC, NBC. I think they get all of their information from social media. You know, they're on Netflix. They don't watch television like when we were growing up and we would see those type of ads. So I'm just curious how effective in the future, if they were ever going to do a campaign, I'm not sure how effective it would be unless they targeted kids through social media.
yeah, good point. You know, it's funny because in working on the state budget this past term, being on the Finance Committee, and more specifically, I'm the vice chair of Division 3, which covers basically just Department of Health and Human Services. Believe it or not, the Department of Health and Human Services in New Hampshire is 40% of the New Hampshire state budget. One department, 40%. And it's about a $15 billion budget total. But a big debate that we have in Division 3 is when we allocate money, when we fulfill requests or we take in requests, we sort of think of them in two categories. One is what actually touches the person. You know, there are those in healthcare, we have hospitals that the state runs and Medicaid and so on. And then the other category is not necessarily expenses that touch the person. And some feel like advertising campaigns and publicizing various things could be in that category. Some feel that that category that doesn't necessarily touch the person is not the priority category. So it just goes to, with campaigns, it would just be another campaign of awareness. Whereas, you know, we have Medicaid that always needs more money and so forth. Certainly a campaign is important, but there's that debate when it goes to Concord as to how to spend funds efficiently so that people are getting what they need.
Maureen, I want to switch tracks here and talk to you about Senator John McCain. Now, he was one of my favorite people. Every time he visited New Hampshire, I had the opportunity to meet him. And so I probably met him 20 times. He was fun. His talks were interesting and lively, and he always told great jokes. But you were a part of his 2008 presidential campaign, correct?
Yes. I worked for that campaign mostly as a coalition coordinator.
You were on the Straight Talk Express?
Yes, I was. The Straight Talk Express, that's right. And in fact, I have here John McCain's book, Faith of Our Fathers, and his autograph right there in terms of that. You know, and Pam, you just mentioned you had met him 20 times. I am not surprised because he was the master of retail New Hampshire boots on the ground politics. I mean, if he didn't meet you 20 times, I don't think he felt like he did his job. He was so involved, and I traveled along with him to town hall meetings and set up town hall meetings and picked him up at the hotel once, all of this. And he was just so retail politics. He wanted to hear what people had to say. and he wanted to get his message out, which was always straight talking.
Yeah, Maureen, I will tell you a really funny story. So back in, I think it was 1998, it might have been 1997, but in my local newspaper, there was a little ad that Maureen Barrows was having a barbecue at her house for this senator from Arizona. And if you wanted to go, just give her a call. So obviously I was friends with her son in high school. So I gave her a call and I said, Mrs. Barrows, can I come to your barbecue? And she was like, sure. Now at the time, I wanted to get into politics, but I really didn't know anything about it. I really didn't know anyone, maybe besides Maureen Barrows, that was in politics. Very naive, very young. And I went to this barbecue and I met John McCain. There was probably legitimately 15 people there. Mm-hmm. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know he was a war hero. I think I barely knew what state he was from. I don't think any of us really knew who he was, but we were there. And I distinctly remember talking to him and to Peter Spalding from Concord.
Yes.
So I'm talking to those two. And I think they were asking me about my interest in politics. And I was like, someday I would like to be the governor of New Hampshire.
That's fabulous.
Like, how embarrassing is that? How embarrassing.
Oh, that's wonderful. You'd be a wonderful governor.
Well, I have no interest in the job currently, but I can't even believe that like I had the tenacity to even say that to a United States senator. I
applaud that. You were speaking your truth. I mean, and that was a wonderful goal. And it was great that you saw yourself as someone who could be governor of New Hampshire at such a young age.
Yes.
Isn't that fabulous, Maureen?
That is great. That's aiming high. And, you know, Pam, there's an opportunity every 2 years.
Exactly.
So don't rule anything out. Don't rule anything out. Every 2 years, mark your calendar.
We've already got one candidate as a co-host on this show. Why not two?
I'm good.
That's right.
I also remember being at Mrs. Barrows' house on a different occasion during that 2008 campaign. And we were all waiting for the senator to show up, and then the car pulls up and you get out of the car and then he gets out of the car. I was like, I can't believe that Maureen is in a car with John McCain.
Wow.
Oh, that's a great memory too. Wow.
Well, I'm jealous. I never got to meet John McCain even once. And I, of course, as a Democrat, didn't agree with him on everything, but I do think he was a great American. I think he was extraordinarily heroic and he was principled. And he was an honorable man.
Absolutely. His background is really can't be compared to anybody else.
No,
it's extraordinary what he went through.
No, I miss him.
Yeah, definitely. And he did his best to pull everybody together and try to get this country, you know, on the right track. And so what a surprise it was, really, I thought, when he didn't quite take it. The presidency.
I think there were two factors that did him in. I think it was picking Sarah Palin as his running mate.
Okay.
And I think it was the financial meltdown, the start of the Great Recession in the fall of 2008, right before that election. I think I think he might have won if those two things hadn't happened.
Good observations. You know, he loved New Hampshire. And in fact, when I went to the convention, which was in St. Paul, Minneapolis at that time, to be a delegate for him, looking for our seat, you know what it looks like because you've seen these conventions on TV. And there's New Hampshire, front row.
That's awesome. That is amazing. What did you think of Sarah Palin? Because I know you had a lot of opportunities to like talk with her and meet with her back then.
That's a great question.
Yeah, that is true. I did travel with her at times when she would visit the state. She certainly brought a lot of attention to the campaign. I'll say that, both positive and negative. There were a lot of people lined up specifically because of her. A lot of young females, it seemed particularly, were very fascinated by how she was able to balance public life and her young family and now being a vice presidential nominee. Certainly spoke a very good line, but did not go over well in the media, in my opinion, and that does factor in. It does. So we'll see what happens there with her in the future.
I remember, really waiting to find out who he was going to pick for his vice president. And I distinctly remember being in my car, listening to the announcement, and they were like, it's going to be Governor Sarah Palin from Alaska. And I was like, who the hell is that? Like, who? Like, what? I was really shocked. I mean, in the end, I liked her. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, she's the greatest thing ever. I liked her. I thought back then, she was a role model, being a governor of a rather large, interesting type state. I kind of lost track of her since then, but I was really surprised. I don't know, right? Alaska? I was like, really?
I know. I had that same feeling, and I've had a couple of times when the presidential nominees have been announced. I've thought, uh-oh, like when Al Gore picked Joe Lieberman, my initial reaction was, uh-oh. And when John McCain picked Sarah Palin, I thought, And she was a big disappointment to me, because as a woman, I was thrilled that a woman governor was the vice presidential nominee, whatever your party was. And I thought she had a lot of presence, and so she could deliver very strongly in that way, but she just did not appear to be prepared to be vice president. And that was, as a woman, that was hard too, because I want to see competent women who are on the front lines.
Yeah, very good observation. I also want to add, I don't know, this is just my opinion, what the chemistry was between them in terms of how well they worked together and how well they knew one another. And I think that it's very important, especially when you're going on the campaign trail, that you be completely in sync with your vice presidential pick. And I didn't ever get really the impression that they had a long knowledge of one another in terms of how each other worked and a synchronized message. And I don't think that worked very well in their favor either. So I don't know the whole story in terms of how that happened or how she was picked, but I'm not quite sure that they knew each other real well.
And I think that what you're saying, I totally agree with you, because I remember stories that have come out since about that, but it's kind of seemed like the aides or the handlers for each of these two particular people just weren't in sync, like you said, and may actually have, there may have been some animosity. I don't, just from what I read, I wasn't a part of any of it, but yeah, it definitely seemed like those two factions never really came together and coalesced between behind an idea, a message, and sticking to it. It definitely did seem like two types of factions going on.
I was just under the impression that it didn't occur to John McCain that a governor would be as ill prepared as Sarah Palin turned out to be. I think he came into that relationship with presumption of competence. And I think he was probably shocked by what he found.
Yeah, but I don't think that Sarah Palin was incompetent. I mean, she was the governor of Alaska. She did a really good job. I don't think she was incompetent. You just didn't like her, right? I mean, I think that's the reality. Like, you didn't like her. I actually really liked her. I mean, I thought, I was excited. I remember I went to one of her rallies. It was exciting. Like Maureen said, there was like people like miles down the block. I waited for like 3 hours to get in. I really liked her. Like I said, I've kind of lost track of her. I really don't know what she's doing these days, but I thought she had a really good handle on energy policy because of being from Alaska. I mean, I thought she was very competent. I just think Democrats didn't like her, and they were just like, she's not competent. She's a Dumbo. I can see Alaska or whatever. I can see Russia from my window or whatever. It's just all that craziness.
I've got one story for you. I remember when she was first announced, and I was at the campaign headquarters, and I hadn't seen a volunteer in a while. I asked about, the volunteer and where they were. And the answer was, well, unfortunately, they stopped volunteering because Sarah Palin was chosen to be the vice presidential nominee.
Wow.
I said, oh boy, that's too bad. Then I noticed some new volunteers in the office. And I asked, wow, hey, nice to have you on board. Welcome. And they said, well, we're here because John McCain picked Sarah Palin.
There you go.
So we lost some, we gained some with that. I thought that was really pretty classic, how you cannot make everybody happy. That is for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing all that stuff with us, because you really got to know him extremely well. So tell us what else is going on up at the State House. Anything good?
Oh, so much, always something. And it's always something new and exciting. In fact, we had a bill recently about declawing cats. Who would have thought legislators would be experts in that?
Wow.
But one of the, did you say meow?
No, I should have.
But one of the bills that came up very fascinating is the exoneration of Goody Cole.
Who?
Exactly. Now, Goody Cole, you have to go back to the 1600s for this one. She is the only woman convicted of witchcraft in New Hampshire.
Wow.
And she has Massachusetts ties too. Apparently her reputation in Massachusetts, if you dig deep, was not a very good one. And that probably, who knows, influenced her reputation in New Hampshire. But the bill, the idea behind the bill is to exonerate posthumously the only female convicted of witchcraft in New Hampshire. Her name was Eunice, nicknamed Goody Cole.
Do you support this bill?
Did the legislation pass? I mean, what happened?
Yeah. Well, this gets interesting, as it always does. Yes, I voted for it. And believe it or not, it passed the House 317 to 45.
Wow.
That's a blowout.
Huh.
It is, and yet who would vote against this?
Well, yesterday it was killed in the Senate.
Way. Are you serious?
God.
Way.
14 to 10.
Oh,
And
it's the same as the cannabis vote.
now, that's right. Now, the debate on that was very interesting as well. I tell you, the state Senate had a great day yesterday, mostly because they took up House bills. We're the ones who introduce all the interesting stuff. The Senate gets to have the good debates on what we do. But they brought up a couple points, and Massachusetts comes into this. The first point is this bill a violation of the separation of powers? Why is the legislature exonerating someone who's been convicted? Shouldn't it be the judicial branch? That was, I thought, argument one. And then argument two was basically, this is Massachusetts's problem. New Hampshire wasn't even really around in the 1600s. Massachusetts was the colony. She was convicted under the structure of law then. Massachusetts should be the ones to exonerate her, not our problem.
Oh my goodness. Well, I got a little background for you on this because Massachusetts actually pardoned someone who was convicted of witchcraft just last year. She wasn't convicted last year. She was pardoned last year. Normally commutations are taken up by the governor's council, but since the witness was not available to testify, it was the legislature that did it. So I wonder if witness availability might be an issue in New Hampshire as well.
Yes, that could seriously be the case for sure.
That is really interesting. And Maureen and Mara knows this, and you know this, Maureen, but I was a state representative 20 years ago, and I actually represented the town of Hampton and Hampton Falls. And Goody Cole was from Hampton.
Oh.
Even though at the time, Hampton was part of like the Massachusetts Bay Colony, she lived in Hampton and allegedly is buried there as well. I'm not familiar with any type of grave. I've never heard of a grave. I've never, in any of the history of Hampton I've ever read, I don't believe it. But there is a legend that when she was buried, that they stuck a dagger or a stake into her grave, and then they put a horseshoe tied onto that dagger. So it was like, I don't know, some type of 1600, superstition, but allegedly. So the other weird thing is that Goody Cole is really well known in Hampton. There used to be a restaurant, barbecue place, go to Goody Cole's in Hampton. They actually moved over to Epping and they're delicious. It's delicious food. But you'll see different Goody Cole stuff throughout Hampton. And in the center of town in Hampton, there's an inn called LeMay's Inn. It's been around since the early 1700s. And the Old Salt restaurant operates inside LeMay's Inn. And the legend is that Goody Cole's ghost haunts this inn.
Oh, wow.
Well known. And where that comes from, I don't know, but they definitely say there's a ghost and everyone says it's Goody Cole. So about 2 or 3, 4 years ago, my husband and I were at the Old Salt. We were eating dinner and my husband kept like moving his right shoulder like in this weird fashion. And I'm like, what are you doing? Now, again, my husband, like, police officer, very, straightforward, not a crazy guy. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, is there a child poking my shoulder?
Whoa.
Wow.
I looked over, and I mean, there was no child there. I knew there wasn't a child there, but I looked over and there was an elderly woman who was actually seated behind him that was facing her spouse. And I was like, no, there's no one, there's an elderly woman behind you. And he was like, someone keeps poking my shoulder.
Whoa.
It's Goody Cole. I was like, oh my God, Goody Cole is here. But he was like, it was a ghost for sure. Someone was poking my shoulder. So when we were leaving the restaurant, I said to the manager, like, oh my gosh, Goody Cole is poking my husband's shoulder. It was super exciting. I was really excited.
I wouldn't go there tonight after what the New Hampshire Senate just did to poor Goody Cole. I would not go to that inn.
Well,
Anyway.
right. I was going to remark that, she's probably waiting for an exoneration to rest in peace, and seems like she's going to have to wait a little longer. So you may still see her in that restaurant or feel her.
Wow. So I don't know. Are we ready for lightning round questions?
Oh, yes. Maureen, okay, we're at the lightning round stage.
Oh.
I'm going to ask you 3 fun questions. Okay. So first, what is a book that changed your life?
A book that changed my life. Wow. I'm going to go with the Bible.
Yeah.
That's a good book.
That's what they call it, the good book.
They call it the good book for a reason. Yeah.
And it's amazing how timeless it is. And it's amazing too that every time you read it, you get something more out of it you didn't see before, even though you were raised with it or what have you. It's really incredible. The insight, the dramatics, and all of that is incredible. I went to Israel a couple of years ago and got the full tour, and they said you'll now see the Bible in color when you hear the stories. Wow. And it's true. You now know and have a visual of where all these things took place.
I'm a weekly Bible reader as well, and I do Bible study, and I love it, and I totally agree with you. And I have the certain portions of the Bible that I absolutely love. Like I think I've read Philippians like 794,000 times.
Wow.
No, I've been reading the New Testament, and it is incredibly powerful. I mean, this is why people have been reading this stuff for centuries. The Sermon on the Mount is just, it's stunning. So this leads us to our second lightning round question, which is, which political figure, living or dead, you would most like to meet?
Ronald Reagan. Yes, I'll choose Ronald Reagan. In fact, I have here next to my plaque, by the way, of when Pam and I helped to change the interpretation of a Supreme Court law. I have
nice
a picture.
Work.
Yes. I have a picture someone gave me of Ronald Reagan, and believe it or not, it's made out of duct tape.
Whoa.
And it's that was this artist's medium, and it looks just like him. It's extraordinary. But I would choose Ronald Reagan for many reasons. First of all, he was so influential during my upbringing. I mean, he was the president for all of those years. He did a great job of bringing everybody together. He was a great communicator. He had great charm and was able to entertain any kind of an audience. And I think it would be fantastic to have a conversation with him about his presidency and about times nowadays and where the country's headed.
That's really, we had Congressman Mike Rogers on the show a few weeks ago, and he said Ronald Reagan as well. Yeah.
No kidding.
I think, you know what? I would love to talk to Ulysses S. Grant.
Oh.
Love that. That would be my first choice. I would want to talk to him about like the Vicksburg campaign and just, everything that happened after that. And then again, obviously being president. I actually probably would like to talk more about the Civil War with him than the president.
Oh, well, I would agree with our last 2 guests or prior 2 guests and go with Abe Lincoln. But now I'm wondering, Maureen Mooney, if you were going to break a streak, because our last 2 guests answered our 3rd lightning round question the same way. What is your favorite vacation spot?
My favorite vacation spot. Oh, that's a kind of a tough one, but I'm going to go with the White Mountains.
Ah, the streak is over.
I'm going to go with the White Mountains.
Hey, the White Mountains are incredible. Do you have a particular favorite?
Oh, I like the presidential range and viewing that. In fact, that is the background of my Twitter feed, is the presidential range. And it's funny because, you know, when you're up there and you're overseeing all the mountains or you're looking at the beautiful landscape, it's so incredibly breathtaking that you really don't think of much else except the beauty of this grandiose mountain range that's right here in our backyard in New England.
No, I agree with you, Maureen. And I was born in New Hampshire. I have family in New Hampshire. I grew up going to New Hampshire all the time, driving through the mountains of New Hampshire. You get no argument from me. I completely understand where you're coming from. It has been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us, Maureen Mooney.
Maureen, thank you.
Always a pleasure. And you two are just fantastic, not only as hosts, but as individuals, and very accomplished in your careers. And I wish you all the best. And I can't wait to see you both again soon.
We can't wait. We can't wait either. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, Pam, you ready to go to Sparrow?
Yeah, I love talking to Maureen.
That was great. That was amazing.
Yes. So let's go to Sparrow. We want to talk about marijuana because we really.
Well, first of all, I call it cannabis and not marijuana, because marijuana, and I didn't know, I had to be told this. It's considered a pejorative by people. It was a term that was used by Mexicans. And so anti-cannabis folks use the term marijuana, they say, to conjure up the image of Mexicans using it. So there are some folks who find that to be, and it's been used, you know, I always called it pot growing up. It was called pot, but you know, dope, grass, reefer. But now I just call it cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, our law, like, you know, the laws are marijuana, you know.
In Massachusetts, it's cannabis. We have the Cannabis Control Commission, and yeah, we call it cannabis.
Yeah. Possession of a Class D substance. If you look at the law, it says marijuana.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
It's like I mean, I'm just used to right from court. I have never heard that it's whatever.
It was news to me, but
knows that. But I'm going to continue to use marijuana. But
I thought you might.
Yeah, I'm just like, what difference does it make? I don't know. No one knows that it's pejorative. But anyway, yeah, I'm totally against the legalization of marijuana. It's heartbreaking to me when dealing with clients to find out that they started using marijuana at such a early age, and then it's a drug. And you know, there's nothing worse than talking to someone who says like they don't work, they dropped out of high school at 9th or 10th, and all they do is smoke marijuana and play video games. And you're just like, I feel bad for you, right? It's terrible. That is a terrible way to go through life. I hate it.
No, I know. And I actually, I've known people who were addicted to cannabis, and, you know, it wrecked their lives. So, I mean, that's from personal experience, not professional experience, but of course I've seen it professionally as well. So I was very reluctant, but ultimately came around to legalizing it in Massachusetts, because I think there are people who are going to use something. They're going to use something. And if it's legal, it's easier, it's safer for them to get. And frankly, I just see a lot more violence arising from using alcohol than I do from using cannabis. So that's where I come down.
I mean, I definitely see your point. I would never vote in favor to legalize it. I would never vote to legalize any type of drugs. I remember years ago, oh my gosh, there was a guy, sorry, I can't think of his name. I shouldn't even brought it up.
That's okay. That's right.
A politician who was running for president, and he was at Exeter Town Hall, and he was like, I think we should legalize heroin. And I was like, the hell?
No.
I literally walked out. I was like, I cannot. Like, this is clearly not spend his days like I do, you know, dealing with people who.
I mean, we're really, as they say, only partially disparate on this issue, because I do think that when you legalize something, you're basically condoning it. You're saying it's okay to use. And as I said earlier in the broadcast, what really concerns me with cannabis is that there are people who do not know that it is potentially harmful. And they need to know that.
Yeah, right. But how do you get to those people, right? And those people aren't 30 years old, right? Those people are, say, 10, 20, right? Those are the people that really need to know that it's really harmful and this is what could happen.
Well, it's got to be in the schools and the school counselors and whatever mental health counseling folks are getting. But it does concern me. And I do think there are a lot of folks who think we should just legalize everything. And like you, I don't agree with that. Access increases use. So when you're talking about something like heroin that can kill people, you don't want to increase use. You don't.
Nope.
Now, I do support safe injection sites, but that's different.
Okay, I totally don't. But anyway.
Okay. We have to go disparate eventually.
If you're for it, I'm against it, Martin. I'm just kidding.
No.
That senator from New Hampshire that said, I mean, because you just mentioned this, like she said, if we want to see a decrease in use, if we legalize it, that's what's I'm hearing is going to happen. Like if we legalize,
I don't see legalization leading to a decrease in use. That's counterintuitive to me. If there's research, I'd like to see it. I mean, we certainly will see a decrease in using black market cannabis, but I don't see.
No, I mean, I'm not, I don't even.
I don't know. We need to get some social science researchers on the show to explain this to us.
Yeah, we really do. Because I know you and I just know you and I have what I would call like street knowledge, right? Because like we work.
Yes.
Right? We have street knowledge. We know street, frankly. And I just.
I can't believe you said that because I tell people, I know I don't look it, but I am actually streetwise. And sometimes people laugh, but I'm like, no, I actually am. I do. I can spot stuff. I know what's going on.
Yeah. I call myself a street lawyer, right? I mean, when you work, I was a street lawyer, right? Like, I mean, I don't work at some big law firm. I mean, I'm a street lawyer. I hustle. I've had 22 years in a really populated, a lot of crime, and I'm a street lawyer.
I love that. That's great. That's awesome. So this has been a wonderful show. Really looking forward. Our next guest is going to be the Boston Globe's Scott Lehigh.
Okay, great.
Okay. Really looking forward to hearing from folks. You can contact us. You can email us at pamandmara@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Going Disparate. And you can catch us everywhere podcasts are heard. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We love to hear from you. We're thanking so much for joining us. If you do find our podcast, do us a favor and subscribe and give us a nice review. It'll help other people find Going Disparate just like you did.
Yeah, just remember, we are your place for stress-free politics and hot takes on crime. Have a good one.
Bye-bye, everyone.